Hey, Katrina here from Scrappy Horses. A very warm welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to share a layout inspired by the strength of the Ukrainian people and all of the beautiful art I've seen on the internet in their support. This mixed media layout features, of course, the lovely sunflower, the blues and yellows, and a quote from Khalil Gibran, and I'm not even sure if that's the way you say his name, but I loved the quote, "Be like the flower, turn your faces to the sun." So with no further ado, let's turn our attention to the layout. So let me start off by showing you some of the things that I used. I used some Offray burlap. This is an old retired stamp set, and I will list the names of the stamp sets in the box below. This is an old book that I tore a page from. I have a metal ruler here, a pair of scissors, a stamp block. You will see that I pull a larger stamp block later on. A couple of small paint brushes and a little cup of water, some gesso and a larger paintbrush to paint on my gesso. This is just some watercolor and some paper that I had used prior on another project, and I liked those colors. That yellow piece you saw was a piece that was just on my table, so I decided I would use it. Some blue buttons, and this particular image is from Power Poppy, and as of this recording is actually free on their site, so I will link all of that below also. This is my homemade journal, and I will link to my blog on that also if you're interested. Piece of plastic packaging just to use as a page protector, and some heavy cardboard. That's just there because, as you could see as I thumbed through my journal, I have some things with lumps and bumps, and so this sort of flattens out the page I'm working on and makes it a little more easy to accommodate. Now I'm showing you this book because I pulled this page to start with, and then I started looking at it, and the verbiage, the text, was so interesting to me, and I thought, ooh, I don't want to rip this up and tear this up because I may want to use this actual text on another journal page. I left this in the video just to sort of give you the suggestion that you might want to read the text that you're ripping up before you rip it up, because it might inspire something else in your journal or another art project for you. So moving on, I am continuing on here by tearing strips, and nothing hard about this. I just continue to rip some paper up here, and I'll be ripping it into different sizes. Now I have inserted a little plastic sheet under the page that simply protects any pages underneath when I go to adhere these pieces in with the gesso. The page that I am working on does, or the paper that I'm working on here, does have a sort of texture to it. When I made this little journal book, I used different kinds of paper. I chose this piece because it did have that texture, and I wondered what it would do with the different mediums, and so it was a fun experiment to try. This little blue piece of paper I found is laying on my table, and I thought, oh, this will be perfect since I'm using blues. Putting a little gesso into an old yogurt cup there. And now I'm just starting to glue down my pieces with the gesso. I decided I wanted to distress these blue pieces and add some blue. When I did that, it flicked blue onto the page, and I thought, oh no. And then I thought, wait, this is great. I mean, this is mixed media. You want lots of layers and lots of different little elements, and this really was kind of a happy accident, as they say. So I finish up this page for right now just by adding some gesso to the middle and adhering those little blue strips. While that's drying, I'm going to make a little embellishment here that I'm going to stick off the top of the page. I'm using a blue button and some sewing thread, and I'm just pushing that thread through those little holes. Very easy. I had a needle out that I could have used, but it was just as easy to do it with my fingers. Use a little E6000 and push that right on there. Now you may be thinking, ooh, that's not very pretty from the back. Well, I'm going to adhere a flower that'll stick out the other side. So there we go. Now I've got a flower that's going to show on one side and the flower with the blue button. Now comes the fun part. I'm just going to cover this page with watercolor. Now I am not a watercolorist at all. I do not claim to have any experience in this. I just chose some colors and mixed them up a little bit and just sort of went in and splotched them around. That's a technical term, isn't it? Splotched them around on the page. You can see in spots, you can see the texture from the paper coming through, which is kind of fun. And you can still see the music and you can still see the words as I go ahead and just add some watercolor to the page. Now here's that lovely image from Power Poppy. I've decided just to add a little blue ink around the edge, and I decided I want to bring that in a little bit further. So I brought in some scratch paper to sort of rub it off and then move it in so it wouldn't be dark. Going ahead and adhering it with a little bit of double-sided tape and some Fabri-tac. I like the Fabri-tac because it gives me wiggle room, and if I don't get that place straight, I have time to move it. Now, you'll notice right there that I have already stamped this on to see if it's going to work where I knew that the image was going to go, my focal image. So I've already tested this. So let's see how it works when I actually put it where I want it, and it works out just fine. So I'm sort of framing out my image is what I'm doing. And I was sort of testing that board, like, is it going to be strong enough down there? Am I actually going to get this? That's what you have to be careful of when you're doing this kind of stamping, because you're never sure what's going to be behind there. So I decided I wanted a little more going on in this page. So again, I went with an older retired stamp from Close to My Heart. It's just a script stamp. And I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and stamp it off and then do second generation stamping. So it's not real dark, but yet it does give me some more texture on the page. So I sped this up quite a bit, but I'm sure you can tell what I'm doing here. I'm just adding that text in. Now here's that little yellow piece that you can see on the left there, and the right side is that Offray burlap ribbon. What I'm doing here is I want the burlap ribbon to stick off the edge of the page. I really like when, you know, the things stick up and off my pages, so I don't need to have everything confined in the book. I'm sticking that piece of cardboard under because I'm going to use this stamp to be a background for my text. So this is honey colored, and what I'm going to do here is just stamp the ink pad directly onto the stamp. It's a larger size stamp, and it is again sort of a honey color. Now I'm going to come in with a terracotta, autumn terracotta color. These colors are retired, but I'm sure that you've got something close to it probably in your stash. I'm just going around the edges. Everything's going along beautifully. I'm so pleased with how it's going. And you know what they say, you know, pride goeth before the fall, and here it is. Ugh. Okay, so now what do we do? All right, so what I decided to do was just lay it back down since I had a clear stamp. And I placed it as carefully as I could. And I took the metal ruler and slid it back there as carefully as I could. Then I started wondering, do I have something on the back of this page? You know, that moment of panic, and it's like, oh no. So I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go between those two sheets of cardboard. That way I'm protecting the page that's behind it, but I'm still getting in there to get that. I pulled it off, and then it was fine. So all crises averted. We are safe to move on. I did have something on the page behind it, but not directly behind it. So I was safe before, but I still didn't want to scratch up and mar up the page in case I didn't want to do any heavy mixed media on that other side. Just distressing that little piece, and I'll go ahead and add some honey ink to it, as well as a little bit of the terracotta color. I'm just doing that to get it to blend in with the other colors that I've already used in this layout. I always love it when I find things just laying on my desk. That's always so fun. You don't have to go searching or anything. It's just right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that on. And again, I want it sticking off the page. So I'm just sort of looking here to see, okay, how much do I want sticking off? How much do I need on there? And I'm sort of eyeballing it, trying to figure it out. Again, I'm placing that plastic sheet over there because I know that I'm going to be putting some Fabri-tac there. So I'm going along the edge, but I have the edge lifted off, so I know that nothing's going to go behind it. Now I'm going to place that in, and I'm going to check now where this is going to fall, and I figure, uh-oh, I need to scooch this over just a little more and put a little more on my page. And now I'm actually gluing everything down on the edge. Now I'm going to come in after pressing this in place, and I'm going to add this right at the edge of the page. So I found this little bit of lace, and I thought, oh, how perfect is this with these little sunflowers? So I used my Fabri-tac and added it to the back of the lace and laid it over the yellow, extending on into the inside of the page there. Now I decided I wanted to bring some of that blue into the left side of the layout, so I just cut a couple of little rectangles and placed those behind my focal image, and decided I sort of wanted to tie the right one in with the blue strip of paper. So I adhered that with a little bit of Fabri-tac. As you can see, I'm getting a little low there, and I need to refill my bottle. I buy it in a large bottle, but I like to work with a smaller bottle. So sometimes I let that bottle get a little too empty before I refill, and this is one of those times, of course. Now it's time to adhere the actual focal image. Again, just a little bit of Fabri-tac, and put it right in place over that fabric, as well as over the page. I wanted to use some sequins just as a little more on the page, so I'm using some gold sequins just to help frame it out and move the eye across the page. I always have trouble deciding where I want to put them, and I always end up putting them in these little triangle formations. I don't know why I try anything different, because I always retreat to that or resort to that. Now I'm moving on to the title and trying to decide where I want to put that so that I want the title to be the focal point of this page, but I really want that stamped flower background to share the spotlight. So I tried to be a bit strategic in placing my little pieces. As you can see, I'm having trouble because the glue won't let go. So I'm putting in I always want to say composer, being a musician, the author of the quote down there on the right hand side. And now I'm placing the quote in itself. I'm finishing this right page off with some little Bo Benny gems that were in my stash. And they are self-stick, so they're easy to just sort of place around. I am leaving the top and the bottom of this page empty so that if I choose to write some thoughts or a prayer in this journal, I certainly can. There's space to do that. Thanks so much for joining me today as I worked through this layout. Know that my thoughts and my prayers are with all of you who are affected by this tragedy. Comments or questions, just leave them in the box below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.